Good morning, John. It's good to see you again. We're recording this on Thursday, the 1st of May. And before we launch into our discussion about the election, which happens on Saturday, the 3rd of May, John, what an extraordinary month we've just been through. While we're going through a federal election campaign in the background, we've also been going through an incredibly volatile month in global markets with the imposition of Trump's tariffs and moves to and fro. We've seen the Australian share market fall about 14% in the first week of April, and it looks like we've ended the month up 3%. So certainly a hugely volatile background for the federal election campaign. John, the Liberal coalition started off about a month or two ago as firm favourites to see a change in government. That has swung around fairly dramatically, and now the betting sites are saying that a Labor majority government is probably the favoured option. How are you seeing the election? And we'll get on to the implications of various scenarios after that.
Well, I think we're all tired about listening to the endless debates, which I couldn't see the point of, most of them. And I think there's a few issues. I think marketing-wise, Labor has done better in marketing than the opposition, and that's come against the opposition in this campaign, and it's only them to blame. Now, whether it's a factor of money, I don't know, but I think running negative campaigns from opposition is not a very clever strategy. You want to talk about policies, and I just reflect on budget response night. You know, Dutton probably hit his peak with policies, including things like the petrol rebate, excise rebate, clever, sensible policy to get cost of living down, and interest deductibility of low-income mortgage holders. It's got to the point, Paul, where no one can remember those policies, which is extraordinary because they haven't advertised the policies which they were promoting on budget reply night. And if you went and asked the average person in the street, they probably can't remember. And they didn't watch the budget reply speech. That's the problem with the budget reply speech. 99% of people don't watch it. So you sell it in the campaign, not on that night. So that's what's come a cropper. There's two other issues I just want to dwell upon it without going in great detail. It looks like we're going to get between 40 and 50% of votes cast before Saturday. So I could be wrong, but I think everyone's got to get ready for a big disappointment on Saturday night that the election will not be known, the election result will not be known, with so many pre-votes polled. I don't know what the rules are this year, but in previous elections they haven't voted absentee or pre-voting on the night of the election. So just get ready for that one. It does go to the point, why are we still lining up and filling out bits of paper in this age of IT and AI and internet, and it's quite bizarre that we can't run an election online and get the results pretty quickly on election night. But anyway, leave that one aside. The other thing is the polls, and I just look at the polls, Paul, and it looks to me like the major parties are scrambling over 66% of the vote, and it looks like on that vote the Liberal Party has a 35 to 31 advantage. And then you throw in the Greens and the Labor Party jumps ahead, probably to the extent of about 42 to 35 or something. So, but there's still well over 20% of the votes which are in dispute, or we don't know where they're going to go. And I think it's going to get down. I don't think it's going to go across the market or go across Australia. I think there's going to be individual seats which are going to confound so-called experts. I think this conclusion of a two-party preferred 52 to 48 is pure nonsense. I think there's protest votes everywhere. I think there's a big protest vote against the Labor Party, and how else can you look at it when their primary vote is 31? That's appalling for a government. It's appalling for an opposition to have 35% primary vote. And even the Greens can't even say that they're done well because they seem to be static. So there's a big swell of 23%, 25% of the votes hanging out there to be preferenced. And I'm not so sure the trend lines suggested in these pre-polling are correct. I think there's a drift to the right of the opposition, and that'll come back. But time will tell. And we saw that with Trump. That's what got him. And the question is, how many people are just not interested and aren't going to vote properly? So I think it's a very uncertain situation. We won't know on Saturday night, but shoot me down if I'm wrong. So they're the points I wanted to make on that.
It seems like the Trump factor has played into Labor's hands. The more that Trump was kind of playing the global disruptor, people had a look at Dutton and said, no, we don't want a Trump-like character or Trump light, and we'll just stay with the devil we know. But so few issues seem to have broken through the public consciousness. It's hard to remember any major initiatives that were articulated, discussed, debated. It's pretty much been an election of small targets or no targets at all.
Well, we're grappling with two interesting policies on housing, for instance, because I think everything else is by the by apart from nuclear. But having a 5% deposit with a government guarantee replacing the mortgage insurance, to me, has some merit. And also the tax deductibility of interest for low income earners has some merit. So a combination of the two, rather than putting two ideas up and running with one, putting the two together in a coordinated strategy probably would help immensely, plus overlaying it with a tax deductibility for renters on low income. So the ingredients are there, but you've got two parties fighting, to me, over scraps. And then you've got the overwhelming issue is, whilst that's good for low income earners if they were implemented and makes affordability more likely or more common for low income earners, it doesn't solve the big problem of the price of residential property in Australia. And I keep on saying there's only one solution to solve this problem, is get the price down, not sustain it up. But that's a very uncomfortable conversation which no one can have in an election campaign. If we don't have it in the first 18 months of the next parliament, then it gets kicked down the road again for another 3 years. And I can tell you now, we'll have a bigger problem in 3 years regarding affordability. Overlaying that is the immigration policies of this country, which no one can make sense of. It's not even documented. It's a free-for-all. It's appalling, So these issues, Paul, you're right. It was a very poorly run. I'd say the Labor Party's done better by doing nothing, and the Liberal Party's done appallingly by not being on the front foot with policies and being too negative.
And certainly you mentioned nuclear as one of the issues. The whole energy policy debate seems very shallow. Like there is no grand strategy being articulated. Energy is such an important part, but no one's really mentioned, what the medium or long-term strategy is. Certainly nuclear has not taken off as something that the public has embraced, so they seem to have just dropped it. What are the implications for the listed stocks that we follow? Are energy companies in the crosshairs as far as you're concerned? Companies like Woodside Petroleum, major energy exporter.
Well, you'll see Woodside, and they made an announcement this week of a more significant investment in the US. If you're an Australian company in energy, and you have the capacity to invest outside Australia, you would invest outside Australia. And that's an appalling situation given the reserves we have in gas. But if I read the article correctly, Woodside are virtually saying it's too hard, too risky to allocate capital to the Australian energy market. And from an Australian perspective, that leads us one way, Paul, higher and higher energy prices. A country like Australia, which is self-sufficient in a whole range of energy sources, whether they are carbon-based or non-carbon-based, it is extraordinary that this country and the people of this country pay what they do for energy, and the politicians, rather than designing a 20-year policy which is stamped by experts and by the people, are parading around as if they know what they're talking about. And I make the point, Australia, if we're going to go solar, why is it so hard for the average household to work out whether he or she should adopt to solar and to what extent they should do it and what deal they should do, and then how are they going to fund? We talk about, the unaffordability of residential property. If you have to then ask to add to your mortgage by 30 or 40,000 to install a solar system, I mean, that is pathetic. that is a pathetic policy. Given that we don't even know how it can be transmitted, at what cost back into the grid, and there's no coordinated strategy. But the average householder has no way of understanding of how or why he should invest in solar in his house.
John, I expected one issue to really cut through, but it never did, and that is the government's proposal to tax unrealised capital gains above $3 million within super. I really thought that was an issue that certainly our audience would be very, very interested in. I thought that would cut through, but in the same way as the debate about franking credits did in previous election campaigns, but it never took hold as an issue. Is this something that is really risking our clients' prosperity? I mean, to me, it's a major challenge.
Well, I jumped onto it straight away 3 years ago and did an interview with Ross Greenwood, which we've published again, where I said at the time it was outrageous. But what's more outrageous about it, apart from the non-indexing of it and the unrealised gains tax, which they say is focused on 0.05% of the population, but we all know that when you break open a new tax, that it can extend across the economy into other asset classes, including the family home. And I made the point that the family home alongside superannuation are two of the three planks of retirement policy in this country. So you can't bring in a unrealised tax on super and not think about bringing an unrealised tax on property. And that sits there. And no one believes anything governments or politicians say anymore, so it is a big issue. But behind it all, Paul, and I want to make it very clear again, and I hope this is the last election where the Prime Minister and the opposition leader are sitting there as beneficiaries of the defined benefit pension, which is indexed for the term of their natural life and can be bequeathed to their partners. I'm not disputing they don't deserve something, and as well as a swag of Commonwealth servants and defence personnel. But it's quite clear to me that the Prime Minister and the opposition leader are in a position of extremely, what's the word? They're conflicted. They've got a conflict.
Yeah.
Now, anyone who thinks about what the Prime Minister would be entitled to if he lost this election and retired next week, what his pension would be, knows that the internal rate of return, the net present value, suggests that pension is worth substantially more than $3 million. Just the fact. Whether it's 6 or 7 or 10, it's substantially more than $3 million. And there is no one asking in the press corps, and I actually put it on them. I think we've got a press corps who sit on buses and trundle around the country having cups of tea, and they're brain dead. This is a very crucial point which we all need to understand, is how are defined benefit pensions going to be taxed in an unrealised capital gains tax regime? Because it's not clear to me, and it's not clear to anyone. So you can't have an unrealised tax on people who have saved all their life and happen to jump through a 3 million hurdle now or in the future, but the defined benefit beneficiaries are living out there and they don't get taxed the same way because they don't have a capital base, right? They don't have a capital base which can be taxed like a self-managed super fund account holder. So we have an election where both leaders are beneficiaries of a scheme which 99% of people can't access, can't benefit from. Our lives would be so much easier if we all had index pensions for life. We wouldn't have to worry, about the future. And young people must sit there and go, what a ridiculous situation. And this is one of the reasons why I think younger people who are thinking look up at our generation more broadly than just us, Paul, but look at some of the, the ex-public servants and the judges and the politicians and think, you've just gamed the whole system, and now you're trying to fill a black hole which you sit in. The black hole is the defined pensions of Australia. We know, if we can check it, there's about a $300 billion liability sitting in the government balance sheet, which taxpayers today are paying. So my final point is, if we're going to bring in an unrealised tax, unrealised capital gains tax, and we collect billions of dollars, rest assured those billions of dollars will go to paying the pensions of defined benefit beneficiaries.
Yeah.
There's a direct correlation. So no wonder the thing hasn't been debated, because the conflict, the hypocrisy is astounding. And the sooner we clear the swamp of Parliament and get rid of all the beneficiaries, then maybe the Parliament can look at the defined benefit schemes and say to someone like the Prime Minister, well, if you think $3 million is too much, here's $3 million and cancel your pension. That would solve hundreds of billions of dollars of liability for this country, which we can then invest in hospitals and schools and universities and infrastructure which we need. It's a big issue hidden by our political leaders.
John, we'll probably have to leave it there. Just a last comment, perhaps. Yesterday, inflation data came out. It looks like the market expects the RBA to cut rates on the 20th of May. Do you foresee a series of rate cuts between now and the end of the year? What's going to happen?
Paul, there'll be at least two.
Yeah.
And I sit here as am I a great economist? I don't know, but I think I've got some common sense. I said a year ago inflation would come under control, and I ticked the government at the time by implementing cost of living policies, cost of living relief policies. I was one of the few economic spokesmen in the country who said that's not inflationary. You had a gaggle of economists everywhere saying you can't do that, it will cause inflation. Where are these experts today? They got it totally wrong. But I'll tell you this, we will have inflation coming next year from the energy market of Australia, unless that Aussie dollar rallies, and that looks like it's going to occur and may save us for an embarrassment. We may get deflation out of China with this tariff war, and we may get a revaluation of the Australian dollar to keep a lid on inflation perking up again. But it's good news, as you say, the inflation rate is below the target rate. We will get at least 2 interest rate cuts. I'm not ambitious about 4, because I think the issues in America need to be watched very carefully. Now, probably next week, Paul, after we get the dust settled on the election, we can go back and look at America, because I think it's very clear there's something developing in the American capital markets, which I'm observing, and I think another week of observation might be handy. But the behaviour of the bond market and the equity market in America defies logic and suggests there's something else going on, which we may talk about next week.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks, John. We'll await the election results with a lot of interest, and I'm sure that our audience will be glued to their TV sets on Saturday night, or
Don't
perhaps
expect the
Sunday.
result.
No. All right,
Okay,
thanks a lot. We'll see
thanks
you
for
next
that.
week.